The afternoon sun blazed mercilessly over 847 Pinehurst Avenue, casting long shadows across the well-maintained duplex that housed two very different families. Upstairs, 17-year-old Belle Turner sprawled across her unmade bed, her bright blonde hair splayed against pink pillows. Frantically tapping her iPhone screen, her perfectly manicured nails clicked against the glass as she attempted to connect to Wi-Fi for the 7th time in 10 minutes. "What the hell?" she muttered, her voice rising with each failed attempt. The password that had worked for months, the one she'd never paid for, was suddenly invalid. She tried every variation she could think of. Password in 3, guest, even stupid landlord. Nothing worked. Belle's room was a testament to privilege. Designer clothes scattered across every surface, multiple devices charging on her nightstand, and a wall covered with photos of her various luxury purchases. The latest iPhone, AirPods Pro, and a laptop that cost more than most people's monthly rent were just normal Tuesday accessories to her. Her frustration peaked when her Snapchat streaks began to break. The horror. Her entire social status depended on maintaining those arbitrary numbers with friends who barely tolerated her. She stumbled to her feet, knocking over an empty Starbucks cup that had been sitting on her nightstand for 3 days, and stomped toward the stairs. "Mom," she shrieked, her voice echoing through the house with the subtlety of a fire alarm. "The internet's broken." No response. Karen Turner was probably at her Wednesday afternoon wine and wine session with her equally bitter friends, where they spent hours complaining about how the world had changed and how they were the real victims of everything. Belle's mind immediately jumped to the most obvious culprit: Peter Torrado, their downstairs tenant. That man had been living in their basement apartment for 2 years, and Belle had never bothered to learn anything about him beyond the color of his skin and the fact that he paid rent to her mother. She'd heard him coming and going at odd hours, always dressed nicely, always quiet, always minding his own business, which somehow made her dislike him even more. The teenager grabbed her phone and stormed outside, her bare feet slapping against the wooden porch steps. She rounded the corner of the house where a separate entrance led to the basement apartment. The sight that greeted her made her blood boil even more. Peter Torrado stood on his small porch, watering a collection of meticulously maintained plants. He was dressed in a crisp gray suit despite the late hour, his tie loosened but still neat. His dark skin glistened slightly with perspiration, suggesting he'd just returned from somewhere important. The man looked tired but dignified, carefully tending to his small garden with the dedication of someone who found peace in nurturing life. "Hey," Belle shouted, marching toward him with her phone raised like a weapon. "Did you change the Wi-Fi password?" Peter looked up slowly, his expression neutral but weary. He'd been dealing with the Turner family's hostility for 2 years, and he'd learned that engaging minimally usually made these encounters end faster. "Good evening, Belle," he said calmly, setting down his watering can. "The internet service is in my name. I decided to secure it properly." "Secure it?" she exploded, her voice cracking with indignation. "We've been using that Wi-Fi for years. You can't just change it." Peter's eyebrows raised. "Slightly. I pay for the service. I have every right to manage my own internet connection." Belle felt her face flush red with anger and embarrassment. The logical part of her brain, admittedly a small part, recognized that he was right. But logic had never been her strong suit, and admitting fault wasn't in her vocabulary. "This is so typical," she spat, beginning to pace back and forth on his small porch. "You people always have to make everything difficult. We never did anything to you." The words hung in the air like poison. Peter's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his voice remained steady. "I simply want to control my own internet. Service, that's reasonable? Reasonable?" Belle's voice reached a pitch that probably disturbed nearby dogs. "What's reasonable about cutting off your landlord's family? My mom owns this place." She pulled out her phone and began recording, a habit she'd developed for her moderately successful TikTok account, where she portrayed herself as a perpetual victim of life's minor inconveniences. "And here we have it, guys," she announced to her phone camera, turning it toward Peter. "Our tenant thinks he can just cut us off from internet we've been using. This is what happens when you try to be nice to people." Peter remained still, his arms crossed over his chest, watching her with an expression that somehow managed to be both patient and deeply tired. He'd seen this dance before. The aggressive confrontation, the victim narrative, the casual cruelty disguised as righteousness. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I work long hours. I pay my bills on time. I keep to myself. All I want is to have control over the services I pay for. Surely you can understand that." But understanding was the last thing on Belle's agenda. In her 17 years of life, she'd never been denied something she wanted for more than a few hours. Her mother had always ensured that Belle's desires were met, usually by bullying others into compliance. The idea that someone might have legitimate boundaries was foreign and infuriating. "You're doing this on purpose," she accused, waving her phone dramatically. "You're trying to get back at us for some imaginary slight." "Well, I'm not going to let you get away with this." Peter sighed deeply, picking up his watering can again. "I'm not trying to get back at anyone. I'm simply managing my own account. If you need internet, I'm sure there are many providers in the area who would be happy to set up service for you." "We shouldn't have to pay for internet when you're already paying for it," Belle protested, apparently missing the irony entirely. "Then I suppose we have different definitions of fairness," Peter replied, turning back to his plants. This dismissal was the final straw for Belle. In her worldview, she was always the center of every story, the wronged party in every conflict. The idea that someone could simply dismiss her and carry on with their life was unbearable. "You know what?" she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "We'll see who gets the last laugh here. My mom is going to hear about this, and trust me, she doesn't take kindly to people who disrespect our family." Peter paused in his watering, a shadow passing across his face. For just a moment, something flickered in his eyes, a memory perhaps, or a recognition. But it was gone quickly, replaced by resignation. "I'm sure she will," he said quietly. "Have a good evening, Belle." As he turned to go inside, Belle stood there fuming, her phone still recording her own red face and disheveled appearance. The late afternoon sun cast harsh shadows across the porch, highlighting every line of anger and entitlement etched into her young features. She didn't know it yet, but this moment, this petty argument over Wi-Fi, would set in motion a chain of events that would shatter her understanding of everything she thought she knew about Justice, family, and herself. Karen Turner was terrified of him. Not because he was dangerous, but because he represented a past she'd tried to bury. And Peter had been their tenant for 2 years, living quietly below them, probably recognizing Karen but bound by legal agreements not to expose her. He'd endured their hostility, their racism, their harassment, all while knowing exactly who Karen was and what she'd done to him. The destroyed plants, the police harassment, the Wi-Fi cruelty. It was all part of Karen's ongoing attempt to make Peter's life miserable, to drive him away before he could somehow break his silence and expose her. Belle's phone, which had been recording the entire time, captured her reading through the documents, her face growing paler with each revelation. She looked directly into the camera, her usual performance gone, replaced by raw shock and horror. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Oh my God, what have we done?" Outside, she heard the sound of a car door. Peter was home. Panicking, Belle quickly took photos of every document with her phone, her hands shaking so badly that several shots came out blurry. She shoved the papers back into the folder, replaced it in the drawer, and stumbled toward the door. She made it outside just as Peter was coming up the walkway. For a moment, they stood facing each other, the young woman whose family had tormented him for years, and the man whose life had been systematically destroyed by that same family. Peter looked tired as always, but when he saw her coming from his apartment, a flicker of something crossed his face. Not anger exactly, maybe disappointment, maybe resignation. "I didn't," Belle started, then stopped. What could she say? She had no excuse for being in his apartment, no explanation that would make this right. Peter just nodded slowly, as if he'd been expecting this. "I see," he said quietly. "I'm sorry," Belle blurted out, surprised by the sincerity in her own voice. "I'm so sorry." But Peter was already walking past her to his door, checking for damage, assessing what had been disturbed. His shoulders sagged with the weight of yet another violation, another reminder that he wasn't safe anywhere. Belle ran home, tears streaming down her face, the weight of those documents burning in her phone like radioactive material. Everything she thought she knew, about her family, about right and wrong, about us versus them, had been obliterated in a single afternoon. Her mother was waiting for her, eager for a report on her successful infiltration, but the daughter who returned was not the same one who had left. Belle burst through the front door like a hurricane of guilt and rage, her face streaked with tears, her phone clutched so tightly in her hand that her knuckles had turned white. The late afternoon sun streaming through the windows felt too bright, too normal for a world that had just shifted on its axis. "Mom," she screamed, her voice cracking with emotion. "Mom, get in here." Karen appeared from the kitchen, still wearing her apron from preparing what she'd probably been planning to call a celebration dinner. Her face lit up with anticipation, expecting to hear about Belle's success. "Did you find something?" Karen asked eagerly, wiping her hands on her apron. "I knew that man was hiding something." "What was it? Drugs? Stolen goods? Evidence of—" "You're a monster," Belle interrupted, her voice barely a whisper but carrying the force of a sledgehammer. Karen's smile faltered. "What?" "You're a monster, and I'm just like you. And I hate us both." Belle sobbed, throwing her phone onto the couch where it bounced and landed screen up, still recording everything. "Belle, what are you talking about? What happened?" Karen's voice took on that sharp, dangerous edge it got when she felt her control slipping. "I know what you did," Belle screamed, finally releasing years of suppressed doubts and ignored instincts. "I know what you did to Peter. I know why you're so afraid of him." The color drained from Karen's face as if someone had pulled a plug. She sat down heavily on the edge of the couch, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, but her eyes were already calculating, already scanning for escape routes and damage control strategies. Belle pulled out her phone and began showing her mother the photos she'd taken. "Peter Tirado versus Turner Police Department. You falsely accused him, you lied under oath. You destroyed his entire life because he was investigating your corruption." With each word, Karen seemed to shrink further into herself. The imperious woman who had terrorized their tenant for 2 years was slowly being replaced by a cornered animal, desperate and dangerous. "You don't understand the situation," Karen said weakly. "There were things happening in the department. People were—" "No," Belle cut her off. "Don't you dare try to justify this. He was a detective. He was investigating corruption and you destroyed him for it. And then you had the nerve to rent to him. You made him live beneath us while we treated him like garbage." The truth was even worse than Belle initially understood. As she'd driven home in tears, pieces had started falling into place. Her mother hadn't randomly decided to rent to Peter. She had specifically sought him out. His becoming their tenant wasn't a coincidence. It was Karen's way of maintaining control, keeping him close and miserable so she could monitor him. "He recognized you," Belle continued, her voice growing stronger as her fury built. "He's known who you are this whole time and he couldn't say anything because of his settlement. So you've been torturing him, haven't you? Making his life hell because you're terrified he'll find a way to expose you." Karen's face had gone through a spectrum of colors and was now settling on a sickly green. It wasn't supposed to. He was investigating people I cared about. Good cops who were just trying to do their jobs in an impossible system." "Good cops?" Belle laughed bitterly. "You destroyed an innocent man's life. He had broken ribs, a concussion. You traumatized him so badly he needed therapy for PTSD. And for what? To protect corrupt cops probably getting paid off by criminals." The weight of her own complicity was crushing her. Every racist joke she'd laughed at, every suspicious glance she'd shared with her mother, every moment she'd treated Peter as a threat. It all made her sick now. She hadn't just been raised to see the world through her mother's twisted lens. She'd been raised to participate in active cruelty. "We've been harassing a man whose life you already destroyed," she said quietly, the fight draining out of her. "Do you know what that makes us? Do you understand how evil that is?" Karen tried one last desperate gambit. Belle, sweetheart, you don't understand how complicated. Stop. Belle held up her hand. Just stop. I'm done listening to your excuses. I'm done pretending we're the victims. I'm done being your daughter in this. She picked up her phone, which had been recording their entire conversation, and looked at the screen. The video was over 40 minutes long. Her breakdown, her revelations, her mother's panicked responses, all of it was there, ready to be shared with the world. What are you going to do? Karen asked, recognizing the look on her daughter's face. Belle thought about Peter, alone in his apartment, wondering what had been taken or damaged. She thought about the careful way he'd rebuilt his life, the dignity with which he'd endured. I'm going to tell everyone what you did, she said simply. I'm going to post everything, the documents, this conversation, all of it. Karen's eyes widened in real terror for the first time. You can't. This will destroy our family. It will ruin everything. Our family? Belle laughed bitterly. What family? A corrupt ex-cop and her racist daughter? We're not a family. We're... A cautionary tale. Karen lunged for the phone, but Belle was quicker. She backed away, her thumb hovering over the post button. If you post that, Karen threatened, her mask finally slipping completely. I'll make sure you regret it. I still have friends in the department. I still have influence. Is that a threat? Belle asked, her voice surprisingly calm. Are you threatening your own daughter to cover up your crimes? Because if you are, that just proves everything I'm saying is true. Mother and daughter stared at each other across a chasm that no amount of shared DNA could bridge. Karen saw her privileged life crumbling. Belle saw a monster where she used to see a mother. You don't know what you're doing, Karen said desperately. This will hurt innocent people, my police friends, their families. Innocent? Belle's voice rose again. Where were these innocent people when you falsely accused a man and watched him get beaten? Where were they when you lied under oath? When you ruined a man's life? Karen had no answer. They both knew. There were no innocent people in this story except Peter.